So we're going to get started with a new series. This series is building off of the Setting Up Shop series, where we are walking through all of the different tools you will need, the workbenches, all that stuff to get ready. In this series, we're going to be calling Getting to Work. So now that you know what tools you need, now we're going to show how do you get these things ready to go. And so what we're going to be doing this video is we're going to be looking at planes. On our YouTube channel, we had a video that I was showing how to restore these metal bodied, like an old Stanley style hand plane. And I've gone through those steps there and even talked about sharpening and different things in that video. But we actually don't use these planes in our shop at all. We use wooden bodied planes. And so, and we showed that in the Setting Up Shop series as well. So people have seen these around, maybe screwed to the wall of coffee shops or the Cracker Barrel or something like that. But go figure, these are actually awesome tools that we use all the time. So we want to show you how to tune these up. When you find one of these at an antique store or you buy one on eBay or something, how do you get this thing going? How do you get it making real shavings, doing work? So I want to be walking through this. The first thing though, before we can even get to trying to take a pass with a shaving, is we need to think about what are the things you're going to be looking for. How do you know when one is salvageable or when this example should just stay screwed to the wall, right? Here are things, a few examples of old planes I have not even touched. I bought them or they came in a box somewhere. And so I've done nothing to these planes. And they have just come as they are. There's dust all over them right now. So just for comparison, you see these dark colors, and this is all patina. This is all a bunch of grease and oil and oxidation, all that kind of stuff that's just fading, or not fading, but darkening over time. This is a plane I just made last year. This is birch, and it's the same color as beech. And this is what these planes looked like new. They might have had a little bit of oil on them or something, but this is the color. This is what they looked like. So after a while, they get a little darker, right? So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about restoring it, is that you have this hard-earned patina on there, and so you want to be able to save that. I think I'm hoping you do, because it's a beautiful thing. These beautiful planes are worth preserving. So what you're going to be looking for, you're going to be looking at the surfaces, you're going to be looking at the condition, and there aren't too many features, there aren't too many aspects of the plane that you really need to be super concerned about. It's a localized area you want to be looking at. However, there are some things that are really critical to make it function properly. So the first thing I would do, let's say this is an antique store, and I just walk up and I'm looking at the shelf of these planes. Is I'm going to be looking for, first of all, I'm going to be making sure they have every piece that they need. So if you want to come in here a little closer, you can see this particular plane. It has its wedge, it has its iron, and in this case, this is a double iron plane. A lot of them are double iron, and I'll show you that in a minute, but you can see it has both pieces here. Here's another example, double iron plane. It has all of its pieces. It's not that uncommon to find a plane that has some other iron put in there or a piece of wood just holding it down. That is a good candidate to pass up. You don't want to have to, you can make a new wedge and you can get a different iron. It's just a lot more work. So you want to find an example that has everything. Some of these planes, though, actually are single iron planes. So you can see this body was designed to have only the iron. However, if you can see behind here, I don't know if you can see that, that slot is for a cap iron. So this iron was originally designed to have a cap iron, but this particular body with this wedge, it doesn't need that. So those are the things to be looking for. Does it have all the parts? This one's a single iron, this one's a double iron. Is everything together there? Also, you'll find this is quite common. You'll find the tote or the handle. This one's taped on. It's broken. It has a big screw all the way down through it because it's sheared off. And this is quite common. This time period of plane, the 19th century planes, the grain orientation is like this in the tote. So the grain runs this way. So you can imagine when you're putting pressure, it just shears off. Now, this is actually a quite common grain orientation, and it's quite normal. However, it's pretty weak. So when you compare that to an 18th century plane, one like this, that grain orientation on the tote is this way. It's hard to see because of the patina, but let me show you a different one I made. I made this one. This is a walnut plane, and you can see the body is running this way and the grain on the tote or the handle is running up and down. So that makes it very, very strong. So what you will most commonly find is the grain orientation running this way. And that's fine. That's totally fine. That's normal. And you just got to, use it mindfully. But what that means is you might run into this situation or this situation that you have parts of the tote broken off. It's actually quite common to find little chips out of the back of the totes, the front of the totes. And that's not a deal breaker. I have seen people who with saw handles or plane handles, they'll scarf a piece of wood on there and they'll color match it and everything. I have never bothered to do that. It makes no difference whatsoever for the use. I kind of like it actually. It looks cool. So I wouldn't worry about that. But what you're going to be looking for, I think this one was, yeah. So I'll hold this body still. So if you look here at this, you can see how that's kind of loose. Now this is just glued in with hide glue, and this does not have any pins in it. It's not pinned in place. It's just glued down into this little mortise. So it's rocking around, and you can, they're usually very tightly fit. So you can gently work it free, and typically it's going to tilt up this way, and then you can pull it out. So you can tap it a little bit up here, but gently work it and re-glue it with hide glue. Some of them, the earlier planes, like you can see here, this one, this is pinned in place. So there's a wooden pin that goes down in. So in order to get this tote or this handle out, you would have to remove that pin, which is a bigger prospect. So if this one's wobbling, it's actually okay because it's pinned in place anyways. By the way, if you're making planes, I highly recommend pinning it. So that's the first thing to look for, is kind of the overall, does it have everything? Is the tote there? Is it intact or is it not? Broken, sheared off totes can be re-glued. Something like epoxy is way stronger than the wood. So if you have a clean break, you can glue that back together and that will be stronger than the wood around it. So that's fine. However, the issue is clamping that. Trying to get, clamping pressure straight down is quite tricky. So you just have to be thinking about all that and have a good clamping system to be able to glue a tote or handle back together. So then the next thing I'm going to be looking for is, okay, let's say it's got everything. Now I'm going to look at the condition of the body. And I'm going to assess the sides, try to see what's going on with the sole, and I'm looking for big checks. You can see here, let's see if I can get it in the right light. You see this right here? That is a big split on the side of this body. And it starts here, right at the cheek, and it sheared off right there. So there's not a lot of material to be able to glue that back down. You can see that. It's like this little feather that's lifting up. So that's not good. Probably this plane could work okay, but it is quite fragile right now. And check out this one. So this had the same thing happen, and there's a screw in here, and there's a screw back here, because basically that amount of material is so thin that glue isn't going to be typically enough. So people often will add screws to the side of that. Now, this is actually, you'll find this, but this is not just inevitable. This is not just something you'll find in every wooden plane. This is basically a sign of neglect or abuse, that this was in some condition, that was in some circumstance, that the moisture and the humidity and the temperature were rising and falling, or something like that. It was not stored properly, and so it was freaking out, and it shrunk hard onto the iron and just cracked the side out. So that kind of situation is what causes that. So you can see there are ways to repair it, but it's something, if you have a choice between this and one that isn't cracked, I would say, well, that's not ideal. You want to pass that up probably. The other thing, actually, since I have this plane in my hand, you can see this one has a new sole laminated on the bottom. This is close to its original height probably, and it was just worn or flattened way down to this. So this person laminated a new sole on the bottom. And this is not totally solid there, so that would require some work. So if the sole is intact, that can be fine. But sometimes you'll see that it might be like this one actually is loose. Yeah, I can feel it's loose. So that would require some work. That would be one you'd want to, this would be at least a less desirable one. So the other thing you're going to look for then on the body is you're looking for checks and cracks. And let's see what the condition of these would be. Yeah, most of these are pretty okay. So if we look at the sole of this one, you can see there's a little check here. That's actually relatively common. And there's a check up here and on the ends. And then all these are scratches. This is when someone went over a nail accidentally. You can see that. And really that the scratches in the sole don't really hurt anything because they're just depressions beneath the surface that's planing. So, if once you flatten it, if there's still a depression right there, that's not going to make it not cut. It's just looks ugly. But this is the work surface, so that's not that big of a deal. These splits, these checks are usually almost always super stable. They don't go anywhere. They're just what they are. And then what you're going to do is you're going to be looking at the end grain. So if you want to look down on this, so you can see the end grain here. And do you see how the checks, because this is so dirty, it's hard to see the grain, but the rings on the wood are running this way. And so what's helpful about the checks is that when it's so dirty, the checks actually run perpendicular to the rings. And so you see how these checks are running diagonally like this. That means that the pith was over here and the outside of the tree was over here. So that means this whole body is actually diagonal, which is the least desirable orientation for grain. That's the least stable. So if you see diagonal checking, that's not really a good sign. That might be a sign that there's more wrong with the body potentially. So let's see if I can find another example of a more ideal grain. This one's ideal, but we don't have checks to show you. Okay, so this one's quite old. This is like an 18th century plane, so it's really beat up. However, I just want to highlight, see how the checks are running straight up and down, and that's because the rings are running this way. So the checking is running up and down, and that's a good indication of grain orientation. However, this plane is so beat up and so old that that's not going to be a great user. Let's see if I can show you in this case. Okay, so this is also ideal grain orientation, but it's just not checked at all. So what you're looking for are these rays that are running across the rings. See those light stripes? That's showing you that the grain is oriented this way. And so that's a really good candidate. That's the ideal grain orientation. Typically the pith or the heart is up and the bark is down. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the light rays or the checks running straight up and down to tell you this is probably a more stable plane. A lot of these are beech. You can get planes in different woods around, but a lot of them are beech. That was a pretty standard plane making wood for a long time. Birch, in America, birch was used before, and so yellow birch in particular. So that's what I used for my plane. So those are the things you're looking for. You're looking for checking, and if you have checks on the ends, it's not a deal breaker as long as they're, nothing's loose and flapping. If it's just a visual thing, that's fine. On a trying plane like this, the longer planes, the flatness of the sole is much more important. So if you were to have, say, with this plane, you could take a straight edge and make sure your iron is inside the mouth, and you could check and just see what the flatness is. But it's wood, so it's really easy to flatten. It's not that big of a deal. So I wouldn't sweat that. And on a foreplane or a jack plane like this, I wouldn't even really agonize over a little bit of out of flat. However, on a trying plane, a big plane like this, I put this upside down in my vise, and I have my winding sticks here so that I can check to see if this is in wind at all, and that's dead on. I'm sighting here. If you don't know what winding sticks are, you should look up winding sticks and see how that works. But basically, this is just exaggerating the amount of twist. So the two sticks should be parallel, and the length is exaggerating at the far ends. It should be exaggerating how much twist there is. So I can see, oh yeah, that's not right on. But this plane is dead straight. There's no twist at all to it. And then of course, I need a longer straight edge to check this. Once the iron is inside, I can check with a straight edge to see if it's a flat sole. But again, it's wood, so it's really easy to fix that. And I'll show you that in a minute. Uh, what I would be thinking about in terms of, let's say you decide, you choose one, and let's say the tote is destroyed. That's not a deal breaker. You can make a new tote. I have a wooden template like this, which is just a 1/4-inch piece of softwood, which is the profile that I like. And you can just, you can find a picture online and take that profile or whatever profile you like, and you can make a little template for it. And then you can make your handle to fit down in there. Usually there'll be remnants of the handle still left in there, so you can figure out the size of the tenon that goes down into the mortise. But yeah, so I played with this. I found a template, and then I mocked up really quick with a piece of it's a 7/8 inch thick board, the profile. I just made one real quick so I could feel it and say, yeah, I like that. That feels comfortable. So that's something you can do for the tote. So let's take this thing apart. Let's look at how would I approach this. Let's take we'll take this one first, and I'll walk through some of the steps with this. So the first thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be seeing if the wedge will come out by hand pressure. Rarely do they just fall right out. Sometimes they do, but usually you just want to check to see what the condition is, right? And then the way you would remove the iron for a smoothing plane is by tapping on the back right here on the heel. And then on a 4-plane like this, there is sometimes there's a strike button, a little button up front, and that's just a piece of wood inlaid in. Sometimes it doesn't have that. Sometimes it's just the top surface. But either way, the way you would loosen it is by, I keep my finger down here so that the iron doesn't fall out of the mouth, and I tap up front. Do you hear that strong rap? And then what happens is, because of inertia, the iron and the wedge want to stay put, and I'm shocking the body forward, so it's releasing this whole setup here. Ooh, that's a good example. So see that? That's not what you're looking for. So this iron is touching right there, and that's not good. That's not good, because if it gets any more, you can see a little bit of a check starting there. If it shrinks any more, it's going to start breaking out the side. But also, as you're doing this, you need lateral adjustment. I need to be able to send my iron, either this way or that way. And with this, I have no ability to do any lateral adjustment. So I can get this out, but that is too tight. So because of that, I would probably grind the edge of this iron down so that I have a little bit of slop side to side so I can adjust. So that's how you would release that. You can also release the wedge by tapping back here, same on the smoothing plane. But I'll show you on this one. So I still have my finger there, and I felt that pop out. And this is a funny little wedge, a little homemade wedge, not the same. Typically, they have these prongs or these fingers that extend down, so it creates this secondary ramp so the shavings can come out. This one was just sort of cobbled together, and it's not going to do as good a job, because typically you want those prongs extending down there, because shavings can jam where the prongs are supposed to be. But so I pull this out, and I can check this condition. I can look at how much of the iron is left. This is steel all the way up to this point, so I still have a lot of life left in that. That is a lot of planing. That's a lot of planing. And you can check when you have these cap irons. It's kind of handy, because I'm not sure that you'll be able to see it, but there's a little bit of light. There's a hollow right in here. It'll touch here, and it'll touch back here. There's a hollow, and that's what's one handy thing about the cap iron, because that helps with fitting, because this is where these two spots are where you want it to touch on the sole. Once it goes in there, you want it to touch right down here, and right up toward the top here. And so this cap iron will really help pull it into that position. So I would look inside of here, and basically you're just looking, is there anything weird going on inside? It's very hard to explain, uh, through words or also to show you in this video. But we've, like in issue 4 of our magazine, Mortise and Tenon magazine, I walked through a lot of this process, and there are more details there. Also, I just made this wooden plane for issue 12, and in that I talked about how to fit the wedge and that kind of thing. So between issue 4 and issue 12, you can get some more close-up details to try to understand how the wedge and the iron and the bed all interact, because it's a little bit tricky. So what I'll show you here is, well, the first thing with the cap iron. Where's the other one I had? Let's see if I can, oh yeah, it's right over here. So this cap iron, on this one, there's a pretty good gap between here, and that's fine. It's just very steep. And this one is a little bit tighter, so it's harder to see. You see that there? But in this situation, you want to be able to see that the cap iron is touching down onto the iron consistently. So you don't have a little tiny gap between them, because that's where shavings are going to be coming. And if a shaving jams into that, it's going to get all jammed up. So one thing you could do is you could try to use feeler gauges, use the finest feeler gauge you can get. But I find that's just a little bit tricky to figure out. So more reliable is if you do have a big gap, I will hold it up and I will look into there, and I will see that there's light on one side and there's a little bit of darkness over there. So that means on this side right here, I will have shavings jammed sometimes, occasionally, and that's what you want to watch out for. So what I would do to deal with that is I'll take this apart. So you want to be absolutely sure you know what you're doing. Okay, I take this apart, use a little screw, and that will come free. So it's touching hard on this corner and not touching here. So the simplest way I've found to do this is to set a piece of sandpaper on there, and you want it to match up where you're going to be putting this, and you want to, oops, you want to pull that out and do that a few times. Press it together, pull that out, pull that out. And as you go through this process, what it's doing is it's taking the high spots down lower. So as I'll guess and check. I'll just keep doing a few and check. And actually that's pretty close. Just those few passes closed up a lot of that light. I still have some more work to do at the very edge, but that's a great way to get you to mate this. Because I think a lot of people, I have seen so many people try to take these old irons and these cap irons and treat each separately to be perfectly machined flat, as if they have to be dead flat. They don't have to be dead flat, and that actually really screws you up when you're trying to make everything fit together. What you actually want is you want the cap iron to mate to whatever this iron is. So by using the sandpaper, you're just conforming it to the deconformity of the iron. So that's a much easier way that you're not really messing with a lot. You're not signing yourself up for some massive, metal work. So that's how I'd approach that. I will also show you how to flatten the sole. So this is, again, a dead simple way to do it. I learned this when I was in guitar making school and for other kinds of woodworking operations, but this is the simplest way. So I will just take a piece of 220 adhesive back sandpaper. Come on. And put that right on there. So this is a piece of plywood that's dead flat. I've also used plate glass that is flat. That works really well. And so you're going to think, oh, this is like cheating. And it is, and it's great. So what you want to be doing is you want to be taking with your pencil on here, and you're just going to do cross hatching across the whole surface to make sure you can see each area. Okay, now I'm just going to place this down. I'm going to put even, actually that's right. I have to keep the iron right in, but I don't want to grind my iron. I just want the resistance, because as I push this wedge, it's going to flex the body a little bit. So, all right, so the iron is inside of the mouth, but now the body is where it's going to be. So now I'm going to keep even tension here. So even on this and even back here, nothing. I'm not going to do this, because then I'm just going to, grind on this side. I'm going to keep even pressure. And you can see right where I'm working. So this is the area that's now flat. This is matching this flat plane. So I would continue to work out to this, and this was actually pretty flat. Typically what you'll find is there'll be a hollow right in there. And that is exactly what you don't want to have happen. So you would want to flatten that. You want it to be touching here. Actually, in Japanese planes, they actually intentionally hollow, like up here and right back here, so that, or behind the iron, and they have it touching. They have high points on their sole up front, right in front of the iron, and then back here, so that you don't have to do that. But what I'm highlighting with that is I'm showing you that what's really important is that you have this is a high spot, if anything. So if you have a little low corner over here, for those of you who are perfectionists, there's a little low corner. Don't take the whole thing all the way down. That is a total waste of time, because what is this corner going to do for you when you're planing? Absolutely nothing. So basically, this is your working area right here, and you want it to be decently flat. So I would just take this a little bit further. Let's just see what that does. And now I know where to put the pressure too, on the low spots, right over here. So the one thing is, you don't want to be using so much crazy muscle that you're like contorting it, or you're doing something unnatural. You're just trying to press it down firmly. All right, so I would continue to work through this. I'd go a little bit further, but basically I would get it to, depending on how I'm feeling that day. If this corner is still not touching and this is not touching, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. This is where the work happens. So that's that part of it, the sole. And off 220, that's good to go. I have a chunk of beeswax that I would then rub across the sole just to get it started. But then that's it. I will never lubricate my soles again, because it's wood, and wood on wood just glides so freely. So that would be the process for that. And then once that's all tuned up, you will, of course, I didn't show you the sharpening process of sharpening the iron, but that's a whole separate discussion about how to sharpen. But once you have your iron sharpened, your cap iron together, you just want to be able to see that the wedge is touching inside the abutments, that there's no gap there. And what we'll do is I will show you a little bit of finishing, but then the next video will walk through using the plane and testing that. So testing the cutting action. So what I'll show you with this for cleanup, basically with cleanup, you can do, it's basically just visual. So you can go from, just wiping off the dust with a rag to using mineral spirits to get some of the grime. When you think about finish treatment, you can think about, you have oil soluble resins or material, gunk, and you have water soluble gunk. And so what you're doing is you're working through the spectrum of oil to water. You want to dissolve the different kinds of resins. And so soap is sort of bridging that. So when you have greasy hands and you wash them with water, it doesn't come off, right? This stuff is not going to come off with just water. You need soap to try to pull the grease off. And so you can start with mineral spirits and get some of the kind of the black grime that comes from hands in the back over here if you want. And that's not going to strip the finish, because a lot of the finish on these planes, almost without fail, it's going to be soluble, or it'll dissolve in alcohol. But if you put mineral spirits on there, that's not going to touch that finish. So you're really just taking off the grime. especially if it's odorless mineral spirits. It's pretty gentle. It doesn't have the aromatic hydrocarbons. So that's maybe one step you could go. But I'll show you quickly what I would do with the ethanol or the alcohol, denatured alcohol. Um, this is how simple my finishing treatment is for tools. I'll just show you on this side. If you had, so you want to be careful with this. You don't want to strip something that you love. So you have to work gentle. But I will just start by wiping the surface with alcohol and see what I'm getting. When you're getting black or brown, that's okay. When you start getting red, you know that's finish. And this alcohol would strip the finish. One other thing you can do is use a Scotch-Brite pad. This is the maroon. I forgot what the grit is, but it's a little bit finer. It's not like the green, dishes stuff, but you can also very gently use this. And so this is adding abrasion to the solubility. You can see I'm being conservative with the amount of alcohol I'm applying. So you can see, you can start to lighten that. And I would work that very selectively so I can get it nice and even, the color working across, but it's very easy to dissolve too much. So you got to work really mindfully. See how that works? So I would stop there. I would not really go far beyond that. I would just continue to even. And so what I've done is I've not only cleaned off part of the surface, but I've actually re-dissolved or amalgamated the finish on there. So it's actually sort of freshened up, but it's dull because I just wiped the surface. So you can also take this same pad, put a few drops of shellac on there, and just add a little bit more. And the amazing thing is this stuff just dissolves the former finish. Oops. And so this doesn't actually need to be sanded or anything like that. It's just dissolving right in. And you can wax that and you can buff it with steel wool or whatever. So in that area, that's what I'm focusing on there. And you can just keep patting it as much as you want. That's the finished treatment that I would take. I don't build up heavy coats of anything. It doesn't need that. It's just supposed to have a clean look. And I would just continue working around the plane until I think, yeah, that looks nice. That's what I want to work with. So in the next video, what I'll do is I'll take it from this to, we have a sharp edge, we have the body tuned up, we got everything working. And then next time we'll say, all right, let's start making some shavings. Let's see, how do we make this thing actually work? How do we get these tools to work? So if you have questions about this, any of these things that I talked through so far, you can leave them in the comments. I'll do what I can to answer them in the comments. But we will continue through this series, getting you set up so you can make some shavings, make furniture, and hopefully you end up knee deep in these shavings. If this kind of stuff is of interest to you, you can check out our daily dispatch where we post tips and advice on hand tool woodworking, whether it's timber framing or furniture. You can click up here to follow that stuff.